Hey, it's Ramon. Hope you're all doing well. Let me just check if this is working. Yep. Um, Want to talk a little about 2018 election. I'm going to be working on a number of projects, hopefully throughout the next week. Going to go into a little more about the Mattis file, which has tangential relationship to what I'm talking about right here. And I know there's more to talk about with Farrakhan. There's more to talk about with whatever. Um, I'm going to today we're going to address the blue wave belief system that the Democrats have. There's a lot of people who built up over probably the last year this belief that the Democrats have this inevitable momentum they're going to build because there is a substantial portion of the population just doesn't like President Trump. But what they fail to realize is that they're not reading the landscape appropriately. They kind of view the world as living according to basically the fantasies that they live through day in and day out. These are people. I mean, for example, they think that this Starbucks retraining, sensitivity training, is actually going to make more people get along better at Starbucks. That's not going to happen. Once you buy into this type of politics of shame and politics of guilt, then you really it means you've lost the public. So this guy Sean Trende, he wrote this article called "What if the 2006 model isn't enough for Democrats?" It says it can often be useful for election analysts to find a previous election to cite as a model for the current one. For example, Brennan Nyan was fond of referring to 2012 as bizarro 2004, where the Democrat campaign ran roughly on the same trajectory as the Republican campaign of just 8 years earlier, and even concluded with a similar margins. There are a number of potential analogs for this year's midterms, but my mind keeps wandering back to 2006. Here's the interesting thing. A year like 2006 might not be good enough for Democrats to take the House. So he's not even mentioning the Senate at the moment. Now, the ideal situation for the Democrats, of course, would be if they were in a position to take either one or both of the houses of Congress. The fact is, it's almost impossible unless they run some amazing campaign or Donald Trump just has this colossal disaster before Election Day. It's almost impossible that they would ever take the Senate in 2018. But from experience, we know never to say never. But I'm not predicting it's going to happen. But so I mean, let's see exactly why he's talking that way. He says the GOP's 2006 campaign started promisingly enough. In 2002, Republicans had surprised most observers by picking up seats in a midterm election while holding the presidency for the first time since Reconstruction. Democrats had done so twice. They followed this up with a substantial win in the 2004 presidential election, enlarging their majorities in both houses of Congress. Things went downhill quickly, however, after a failed attempt to introduce private accounts for Social Security. The Iraq War took a decided turn for the worse. As the deaths of soldiers increasingly dominated the headlines and as Hurricane Katrina swamped New Orleans, President Bush's job approval dropped steadily. This manifested in special elections. In mid-2005, Democrat Paul. So he goes through, there were a number of special elections that happened. The Democrats won unexpected districts or whatever. It says by the summer of 2006, the Republicans were in dire shape. George W. Bush's job approval sat at 36.4%. It improved to 39% by Election Day. Over the course of the month of May, the Democrats' lead in the generic ballot was 11.4 percentage points and was around 15 points for much of October before closing to around 10. The results were awful for Republicans. They lost 30 seats, including ones that no one had believed were vulnerable at the beginning of the year. They also lost control of the Senate. So why might this model not be enough for Democrats? There are three reasons. First, at least for now, Republicans are polling considerably better than they were in 2006. As of today, President Trump's job approval sits at 44% in the RCP poll average. So he's polling way above President Bush in 2006, which is the model that this writer is using. This suggests that despite the similarities, Republicans tend to be performing at least somewhat better. Second, 2006 can't be analyzed without acknowledging that it involved a number of flukish victories for Democrats. These include Tom DeLay, who resigned under scandal. I think he was involved in the Abramoff scandal, which is a lobbying scandal. Republicans were unable to place a different name on the ballot. Bob Ney, who was convicted in a coin trading scheme shortly before the election. Don Sherwood, who was accused of choking his mistress. I didn't know about that one. And Mark Foley, who was accused of having sexual relationships with pages. I think they were like male pages too. So Sue Kelly, another one, caught on camera running into shrubs to avoid questions about Foley. And John Sweeney, who had accusations of domestic battery arising shortly before the election. So then it goes on and says, it gives a number of other factors in it. It says, consider this, in 1994, Democrats held 53 seats in districts that had been carried by George H.W. Bush in 1992, and held 91 seats where Clinton had either lost or won with less than his national margin of 53.5% of the two-party vote. Then he says, of course, at that time, the South still had a lot of seats that leaned Republican at the presidential level, but voted happily for conservative Democrats like Tom Bevel and Sonny Montgomery, but nevertheless meant that Democrats would have a lot of members in unenviable positions if the electoral environment took a turn for the worst. In the wake of the 2008 election, Democrats found themselves in a somewhat better position. They held 69 seats that leaned toward Republicans, with 49 Democrats and seats that John McCain had won outright while losing nationally by about 8 points. The difference was that those Southern Democrats suddenly were no longer willing to vote for conservative local Democrats. 2010 can in many ways be thought of as an aligning election. So they're actually, this is something that I see as really ignoring, I get it why he does this stuff, but he's talking about, for example, special elections. One of the reasons I think special elections are a problem in gauging actual electoral interest is that turnout in those contests is much lower than in regular contests. I've demonstrated time and again, and you can look at some of my other videos on it, that in special elections, the turnout sometimes is less than a third of the ones at either presidential or midterm elections. The other issue that I'm finding is that it lacks any cultural context to what's going on. Any context that so far as how the media has changed. This is the type of analysis put forward by somebody who is used to the old way, the old world of elections, and things have kind of changed. If you haven't noticed, that's why, for example, what's that guy's name? Nate Silver's 538. They got it horrendously wrong during the 2016 election. They were, depending on polling models and scenarios and all sorts of tracking polls and things like that weren't necessarily in tune with what was happening on the ground and people's feelings, and they were relying a lot on space age marketing that's kind of gone out the window in favor of some more I guess direct methods of convincing people. And that goes for both the Republican and Democratic sides. You see, when Barack Obama was elected. He had, first of all, yes, he had a personality to go along with it, and he had a stage presence when he would talk about certain issues. There was the audacity of, I think, was it called an audacity of hope speech? He had a number of speeches during that campaign that were considered landmarks and whatever. And every single event where this happened, the press treated it as a historical moment. It was like basically watching Sherman's March to the Sea, as if Abraham Lincoln was doing it. A black Abraham Lincoln, like somebody who symbolically, at every step of the campaign trail, was changing the way that politics was thought of. That was the way Barack Obama's election was thought of in 2008. But he was, in his actual administration, Barack Obama was an incompetent moron, and was much more out of touch with really the needs of his government, whether it was his party or the actual people on the ground, so far as what people actually needed for him to do. So while he was able to maintain his own image, and still is, and many people refuse to actually criticize him for all of the transgressions he's done against, virtually every side of the spectrum, whether it's progressives or conservatives or, people who are independent, non-affiliated voters. Barack Obama is unapologetic, because the policy was never the focus for him. The focus was him. The focus was the fact that, he's this president with this amazing, family and whatever. So, for them, the symbolics was important. And that's how his campaign was in 2008. And unfortunately, he didn't have many of the traits that the previous Democratic President Clinton, had. Like, you guys know, if you've read my channel, if you've watched my channel, and you see some of my older videos, I'll probably I need to do some more. There have been more Clinton books that I've read, but one of the things that I think we've learned, those of us that have been studying President Clinton, was that he was a brilliant man from the waist up, if you can put it that way. Everything he did in terms of cheating on his wife, which you can say he was kind of compelled to do by virtue of her personality and the way that they behave towards other people, all of that type of stuff. If you leave that out of it, he was very good at hammering out deals. He was a deal maker. He could deal with a hostile Congress. He could deal with foreign leaders. You can say whatever you want about Bill Clinton, but the Dayton Peace Agreement in Bosnia, which he helped hammer out at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Ohio, was an agreement that, was a huge milestone for his presidency. He deserved credit for it. Then there was the Good Friday Agreement in Northern Ireland. This was a person who did know how to do things that were difficult, President Clinton. And people want to confuse, all of his horrible actions as far as China and, the sexual stuff and, the corruption. They want to confuse it and say, well, he had no redeeming qualities. Not true. President Clinton was a brilliant president, and he deserved to be reelected because of his brilliant, the brilliant way that he approached the job. Not because of brilliant marketing, as was the case in Barack Obama's situation. Barack Obama was a president that sounded smart, but in terms of actually having a sense of what to do, absolutely nothing. Didn't know what he was incompetent. Much more incompetent than President Clinton. Okay, so you might like President Obama's personality a little more, but in terms of actual sense of what to do in critical situations, if he would have been at the Dayton Peace Accords, but with the Bosnians, I don't think the peace accord would have happened. That was President Clinton's accomplishment. You should get credit for it. But this isn't about that. What I'm trying to say is, yes, those people who they're analyzing those past elections. Yeah, I mean that's their job, and they feel like they have to do it. But I see here, for example, CNN's Acosta says Trump owes the American people. So even on this very story, he says Trump owes the American people plenty of apologies for the things he said. So this is the White House press correspondent for CNN, speaking on the day when Ivanka Trump's daughter, was insulted by Samantha Bee. Samantha Bee works for the same network as Jim Acosta. Not for the same network, but the same family of networks. She works for TBS. TBS is owned by Turner, or what do you call them? Is it AOL Time Warner? Yeah, I think it is. So they own CNN, they own TBS, they own TNT. And he's saying, well, he owes an apology to the American people for plenty of things he said. Well, that's not positioning him well. Whether you like it, whether he feels justified or not, it's not his discretion to say, oh, the president owes an apology to the American people. Then you see right above that, Alan Dershowitz is saying, this is all their fault. I have not changed, they have, on liberals blacklisting him. Because, and I will say, I think that Alan Dershowitz's worldview, I think, is itself outdated in many ways, in terms of foreign aid and in terms of the way our lobbying system works. Very outdated person. I think eventually he should retire soon. But he encompasses something where, yes, he's saying, I haven't changed, my principles of civil liberties remain the same. Jim Acosta has changed, because under President Obama, he was not the inquisitive reporter. He was not the inquisitive journalist. He was accepting of the things as they were, because he bought into the marketing. He bought into the packaging, whether he did it because of his own desire to do so, or because CNN as a network had a policy of buying into Obama's bullshit. Jim Acosta, in the eyes of a significant portion of Americans on both sides of the spectrum, or any side of the spectrum, if you want to think about it, there's maybe more than two sides of the spectrum. Jim Acosta has lost all credibility, such as the more these journalists want to go out in front of the cameras, they are caught in that Chinese finger trap situation. They can't help the situation by talking. The best thing that they could do is shut up, which they can't do because their job is to report on the news. So they have to. They're trapped in this situation where they have to go out there and put out ridiculous story after ridiculous story. I think today he criticized Trump for meeting with Kim Kardashian. I remember that there was. I don't remember whose book. I think it was probably Gary Burns' second book, where I believe, and I could be wrong, but President Obama violated Secret Service protocols in order to get Bradley Cooper into an event with him without getting screened. Explicitly violated the protocols, basically broke all the rules in order to get Bradley Cooper in. And Bradley Cooper, yeah, maybe he's not as controversial as Kim Kardashian, but the fact is that he was the president, the most celebrity-friendly president there was. Let me see if I have that one. Yeah, I don't think it's this one. I'll have to look up which one it was. It might have been Ronald Kesser's book. But what I'm trying to get across is that This type of activity, basically the star fucking activity that they're criticizing, that was literally every day in the Obama White House. He had like some sort of, here was a meeting. He met these rappers on criminal justice reform in April 2016, and literally nothing happened. He meets them. Think about it this way. This way, he's meeting them in April 2016, and he's a lame duck president with no Congress to help him. So it was literally a photo op. There was nothing he could do. Yeah, he could. Where was this? There's a famous photo of this crap. I don't know why they're not showing the photo. Here's Kendrick Lamar. I actually don't know anything about him, but that's a guy who last week he got into hot water for having a white fan come on stage and say the N-word to one of his songs, and yeah, that was just last week. I can't believe it's already not news. There's Alpha Cat, who I don't know anything about either. Oh, here's the photo. You can see DJ Khaled there. Nice that they let him in. DJ Khaled's actually, say what you want about him. He's an entertainer. Whatever else you want to say about him, an entertainer. Here's Obama with Jay-Z. It's a piece of shit. Yeah, I hate Jay-Z. Always have. I think he's been one of the worst influences on pop culture in years. So that's not related, but we will be talking more about PDVSA at some point. Anyway, what I'm trying to get across is that the paradigm has shifted. 2008, a lot of these bloggers were very important. A lot of these news magazines, there was The Hill was just coming out. Politico was sort of a new thing, and pundits, talk show pundits were really big. And of course, President Bush was a failing president. So, you had this magnetic personality in Obama and a favorable media. It was a very different situation in 2008. 2006, which is the election he compares it to before that. Well, what has been the natural disaster that has happened under Trump? Are people blaming him for the hurricane season last year? You can't really do that because it was his first year. And, I think people were already still so divided over the 2016 election that nobody's opinion changed over his handling of the hurricane or the hurricanes. I think there were 3 major hurricanes last year. There was Irma. There were a couple other ones. It was Miguel last year. In either case, we're seeing really a muddled message out of the Democrats. It's not a message of an actual alternative. Okay, a lot of people who would, in a year like this with Donald Trump, be thinking, look, we need to put forward like a whole platform, talking about the minimum wage, talking about criminal justice reform in a very direct manner, talking about things like breaking up the big banks. Bernie Sanders was saying that. This is not my platform, but it's a platform that would be popular among other people. Another thing, there were some Democrats in 2016 that were economic nationalists. I think Jim Webb was. And a lot of people who were in that sort of camp are absolutely fine with what Donald Trump is doing right now as far as trade, which, I'm not going to predict if it's going to go well or not. I'm not an expert on international trade. But in any case, they're really relying on, in an article like this, they are really angling at it as if everything is going to go the way that it's expected and whatever. Look, the generic congressional vote right now, which about a month ago was like 6 points or whatever. It's a 2 point advantage for the Democrats. Now, yeah, you might say, well, that still means that they're in the lead. Well, think about it. That is a generic vote across the entire friggin' country. So district to district, yeah, that actually gets negated. That lead doesn't mean anything. When you look at certain districts of the country, the Democrats probably have a 50-point lead. You go to districts like Philadelphia, and whatever district that is. You go to the districts like in Jacksonville, districts that are very, very, very blue. Newark. So the generic vote is heavily condensed, heavily concentrated in certain areas of the country where there are large blue populations. Then in the other areas, the areas where they need to win it, that advantage is meaningless. It's actually a complete illusion. It's the opposite of the situation on the ground. You go to districts outside of Metro Chicago or outside of St. Louis in Missouri. You go out into the cornfields, and that generic ballot means absolutely nothing. People in those districts are basically saying, you know what, this election year, maybe I'm not exactly feeling great about what's going on. Or, I'm saying the people who are not Trump supporters, they may say, I'm not feeling exactly great about what's going on. I also don't know if there's anything worth voting for that would change that. And that's the issue. That's the real problem with the Democratic Party. It's not a sense that Donald Trump has done everything perfect. We know that, the issues, intervention overseas in Syria, certainly what to criticize there. The defense contracting, some of these environmental laws that he's rolling back, I'm not in favor of rolling back, to be honest with you. I am in favor of anything that repeals conservation law. I really am skeptical of, especially when you're just trying to do it to allow more oil drilling. So, even people like me have things that we can say where we don't like what Trump is doing. But when we look at the landscape of the country, it's fairly obvious that the alternative that's out there is not actually an alternative. It's actually some sort of generic, over-the-counter placebo that tells people, we're going to drain the swamp. Is basically they stole back the slogan "drain the swamp." They also said they're also they're maintaining the whole pretense that they're the more compassionate party. They're not really the more compassionate party if you really think about it. The Democrats are pretty cruel to their own people. Basically forcing them to toe the party line, or they'll call them a Russian agent. That's what they did to. They called Kucinich basically a Syrian pawn, and they've thrown him in the garbage now. They do it periodically to Bernie Sanders. They're not kind to their own people. You see NBC's Chuck Todd saying that Spygate is going to go away in 5 days. Well, Chuck Todd, does he have a good track record of predicting things the way that they're going to be? No. These are people that they have, their sense of political skill has worn down. And what I was liking it to, I was hoping that I'd get to it earlier, but I kind of got into a rant. Is that we're almost seeing a changing of the guard in the same manner that there was the hair metal era. Let's say Obama would be like the hair metal era. There were bands like Rat and Twisted Sister or whatever, and you could all you needed was like some spandex and like a dumb wig, and you could sell a ton of records or whatever. Well, suddenly a grunge band comes along, which would be Donald Trump. I know the analogy is very, it's not the most apt analogy, but it's, just follow me along. the grunge era, it just provided something that was a totally different sound that people were waiting for, and suddenly heavy metal was trash. Nobody wanted to listen to another album of four people, two of them with like fake British accents, headbanging along to somebody else playing guitar. Um, this was really a paradigm shift in 2016. And the next paradigm shift, but people who are Trump supporters now, you should probably start preparing for, the day after he leaves the presidency. He can't be president forever. He's an old man. You have to start thinking about building a substantial movement about something around, what he believes in, but believing in, non-interventionist foreign policy, pursuing fair trade deals, things like that. It's not the most dogmatic philosophy, but it's at least something, and that's something that can be sustained. If, however, the whole thing is about wearing a hat that says "Make America Great Again," well, that's going to go out of style as well. But I don't think it's going to go out of style in 2018 because the Democrats have pretty much, they haven't torn off the Band-Aid quick from 2016. They've really done the worst job possible of helping the country to move on because they're still behaving as if the Russia investigation is the most important thing. They won't let well enough alone and admit that they don't have evidence of a crime being committed in order to justify continuing the Russia scandal. There were people, Lionel Nation, I think last summer was claiming, oh, they're going to stop talking about Russia or whatever. They haven't stopped talking about Russia because if they would stop talking about Russia, they would have to shift at least some of the attention over to the crumbling infrastructure, the horrible situation of housing in the country, the lack of adequate Veterans Administration facilities. Trump ended up firing the head of the VA. If he privatizes the VA, that would be a major, major change in the direction of what he was talking about. So, again, this was a major paradigm shift, and the Democrats are missing the point. And this is, by the way, I am back on Steemit, but this is a different account. So please, 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 please come and follow me on Steemit. We have, one second, the Mattis file. This is the latest one. You can read all the summary. I know you've already seen the video, if you've seen my channel, of Adrian Lloyd talking to John Mattis on the phone. But the real issue that I want to highlight here is that John Mattis embodies the old school Democratic, partisan who can't let go of the lies that he's told to himself and to others. This is somebody who used Facebook posts of people he knew in order to concoct a fake conspiracy about Russia hacking the election. Okay, and I have the emails too, where he talks about it as if he knows anything. He's never produced any photographic evidence of it. Some of the evidence that he's presented is actually is completely irrelevant. One of them, for example, is a post from after the election. This is actually from only a few days before he went on Rachel Maddow's show in March 2017, where Jim Boydston, who was on the show, he claims that Priorities USA, which is George Soros's George Soros supported super PAC, they fund Indivisible. Well, if that's the case, and Indivisible is a group that was formed after the election, then look, this has nothing to do with hacking the election. You're actually not presenting evidence of this. And what's pathetic is that these people think that people are too dumb to make those distinctions. He also talks about how keyword strategies of Cambridge Analytica, they're a nefarious strategy of Russian infiltration. Well, everybody uses keyword optimization for search engine for SEO. Everybody, I mean, even I know that. I had a friend who was working in that for a while, and you know, this was 7 or 8 years ago. It just doesn't. It's literally you're listening to somebody who is technologically backward and illiterate, and they can't let go. They can't let go of the lies. You have people. It's not just John Mattis, by the way, who says some pretty awful opinions about his former friends. But you know, foreign policies. Jason Brennan claimed that Trump won because voters are ignorant. Literally, democracy is supposed to enact the will of the people. But what if the people have no clue what they're doing? Well, Jason Brennan, maybe then start advocating for a dictatorship. Start advocating for a new system of government, a monarchy or whatever. If that's your solution, then go ahead, try it. You know, start advocating that we should join the EU. I'll show you the article for a second. Oh, look, a paywall. Oh, look, a paywall. Oh, look, a paywall. You know, that's their attitude. Foreign Policy Magazine. Oh, the will of the people. Well, what's it worth if they don't know what the hell they're doing? Well, I mean, maybe then you shouldn't be such a snobby bitch. Maybe that would be a solution. I mean, that's a suggestion. It's far more easy than trying to convince us to join the EU. You know, and all these people, they have this guilt complex that they want to heap onto everybody else, especially not necessarily to Trump voters. They basically consider Trump voters to be demons and think that they're incompetent and there's no hope of ever getting anything useful out of them. And they would probably rather. I've seen actual posts where they say, well, these people are going to be judged and prosecuted after Trump gets deposed from office. Well, you know, that's not the way that thinking. That's not liberal thinking, and that's what this article was about. Mattis's statements, including, you know, the quote at the end, which says, "Think of how naive it was for people to believe that the Democratic Party was going to give us a fair shake." I mean, that's just absurd. The Democratic Party is controlled by the same corporate interests as the Republican Party. Bernie did the right thing. So he was talking about how Sanders basically entered the primary knowing he was going to lose, and that therefore by conceding and backing Hillary Clinton, notwithstanding the horrible treatment that he got, well, he was doing the right thing. No, he didn't do the right thing. Doing the right thing would have been sounding the alarm and saying, look, this party is corrupt. I'm not going to be involved in it any more than I have already. Bernie Sanders is a disgrace to the office of whatever office he holds, you know, the senator from Vermont. And then later, Mattis says, I don't know who ever said I was an administrator of a Bernie Sanders group. I've been a public spokesperson, to which I asked for who. All of my talks have been recorded. So again, I don't want to disparage two sad individuals who ultimately ended up in the Never Hillary camp, who, if they didn't vote, they certainly tacitly supported the outcome of the election. He should be I mean, anybody who thinks that somebody who voted for Jill Stein wanted Donald Trump to win doesn't understand how democracy works. People vote for somebody because they agree with their vision. They don't vote for somebody because they want somebody else who's running to win. So yeah, and to top it all off, the Hill runs in response to the Roseanne firing. So that this is getting into the culture war areas. They run an op-ed from Donna Brazil, you know, a woman who helped rig the primaries against Bernie Sanders, a woman who leaked debate questions to the Hillary Clinton camp. And she said, you know, she's talking about it came on a day when 8,000 Starbucks locations all over the U.S. were closed in the afternoon for racial bias training. A reminder that Roseanne Barr's awful invective didn't occur in a vacuum. Her bile was spewed into an already toxic atmosphere. The Starbucks incident had nothing to do with Donald Trump. The woman who called the police was liberal, not even liberal, probably a progressive. Nothing to do with Donald Trump. It says, we need to applaud ABC for its response to Roseanne's outrages. Here she goes, you know, brown-nosing to the liberal media. They acted quickly and decisively. ABC Entertainment President Channing Dungey said, Roseanne's Twitter statement is abhorrent, repugnant, and inconsistent with our values. We have decided to cancel her show. Robert Iger, head of the parent company Disney, added, there was only one thing to do here, and that was the right thing. It didn't hurt that it was the smart thing to do, but intelligent choices are disturbingly rare in many quarters today. So kudos to ABC for being smart and right. Roseanne the person may be notorious for frequently giving vent to their ugliest impulses of the conspiratorially minded supporters of Donald Trump, but the show Roseanne tried harder to give a more rounded view of the world. Although Roseanne was a Trump supporter, her sister Jackie, played by Laurie Metcalf, represented liberal viewpoints. On the new cast featured grandchildren for Roseanne, including one who is gender nonconforming and another who is biracial. The writing staff was diverse. All of those people are out of work now. Still, the show was portrayed in the media as giving voice to a supposedly silenced segment of America, white working-class Trump supporters. For me, the appeal of both the Roseanne character and even to an extent Donald Trump were neatly summarized in a moment on the first episode of The Revival. Roseanne explains to Jackie the appeal of Trump by saying, he talked about jobs, Jackie. He said he'd shake things up. I wish Democrats would talk more about jobs. That's one four-letter word we should be using more. Well, Samantha Bee used a different four-letter word today, or yesterday. We've allowed the conversation about the economic well-being of working-class people to be hijacked by those who just want to keep them poor, uninformed, and angry at each other. Yeah. No. That's what you guys do. You want to keep them poor. Everybody else wants to make their own decisions. For starters, why does there seem to be no acknowledgement that the working class is not all white? There are African American, Latino, and Asian families facing the same struggles as the Connors. See, she's missing the point entirely. And this is why the generic ballot literally means nothing. Yes, there are poor working class Mexicans and black people, and probably Pacific Islanders and Asians. But the ultimate lesson you have to learn is that when you go out to the fucking cornfields of Iowa, you are talking to white working class people. You're not, for the most part. I'd probably say 75% of the people there are white working class people. And you can ask Dave Murphy, who's listened to the show in the past. I haven't seen him in a while. She doesn't know what the hell she's talking about. She's talking out of her ass. She says, but Donald Trump isn't going to seriously address the needs of anyone in the working class. He spent his business career trying to break unions and stiffing workers out of their paychecks. He conned those aspiring to a better life with his fly-by-night university. As president, he has sabotaged the healthcare system his working class base depends on simply because it's got Obama's name on it. No, that system was broken because of Barack Obama. People knew it. It was a losing election platform to begin with. People didn't want Obamacare to be fixed as Hillary Clinton wanted. They wanted it either repealed, as I did, or they wanted universal health care, as the Bernie people did. And what will Trump's reckless rhetoric and punitive policies do to those gender fluid and biracial grandchildren of Roseanne or the real people like them? Worst of all, he's pitted struggling Americans against each other by demonizing immigrants and minorities. Roseanne, the show, addressed that kind of stereotyping and demonizing of Muslims. Roseanne, the person, just recklessly reveled in it with her racist and Muslim-bashing tweets. It was President Trump's hateful rhetoric, intentional lies, and vicious conspiracy mongering that set the tone for everything that Roseanne Barr said on the day she'd. So I'm gonna just skip ahead because this is stuff I literally read 5 times a week, all the time. And here's some of the comments here. Let's see if there's anything interesting. I didn't read the comments before like I did in the previous video. And, here, right away. But it is okay. Keith Olbermann is still employed by ESPN under Disney. Denying double standards is not a good look. And this person whose icon says no Tea Party, pretty old, probably. What about? So this person says, so double standards are perfectly acceptable, and you wonder why Trump won. And this, people are saying, oh, Colt 45 or whatever. This person says the problem is that they don't think that there is such a thing as a libertarian. Let's go through. So it says, with regard to Olbermann, as much as I join you in hating him, Trump openly supported white supremacists, so he is indeed a Nazi sympathizer and what is not a bigoted remark. Also calling him fucking Trump while rude and disrespectful is not racist. Well, no, that's actually not true. He did not openly support white supremacists. People are not, they're not having this bullshit. People are arguing about trickle-down economics. There's people in 2018 who are arguing about something that was, it was a talking point back in 1992, or 1990, or actually it's 1989. There's a lot of people who, they read this article and they didn't even make the point I did, which I'm surprised, and I would hope that they did. Donna Brazile admitted basically that Hillary Clinton bankrupted the party, or Barack Obama bankrupted the party. She admitted that the Hillary Clinton wing of the party took it over. She essentially admitted that the primary system was a farce within the party. In order to restore confidence in the party, they would have had to show at least a modicum of willingness to reform it. I'm distracted by that Trump clip at the bottom. People read this article and they see this at the bottom with him signing some legislation that would help people take experimental treatments for life-threatening conditions, and they're like, well, I mean, why should I trust Donna Brazile? I see all this evidence of things happening in front of me. They see Avenatti, the lawyer for Stormy Daniels, withdrawing the case. You see all this stuff. The Democrats were saying over and over again, oh, this is going to sink him, this is going to sink him. It doesn't happen. So people are tired of this crying wolf deal, and they're seeing, this blue wave doesn't really mean anything. There's no substance to it. They're not reforming the party. They're not putting forth a vision of a new working class agenda, a new agenda to address, let's say climate change, whatever it is. I mean, what was their answer for climate change? The cause that they talk about all the time. Sign the Paris Peace Agreement, Climate Accord. Well, what does the Paris Climate Accord do? Well, it lets China and India do whatever the hell they want for another 10 years. Well, that doesn't help climate change. Doesn't help it at all. Anyway, please read the Steemit article over here. The actual, original Hard News Network article is also there. So, whatever you want to do about that, that's good. Whether you want to read the original, but please go to the Steemit one and vote it up. I'm trying to rebuild my Steemit following to what it used to be. Account issues were there. Not any violations. It's just hard to deal with Steemit and its account issues. There's a new account. Please subscribe to that account or follow it, and also like the article on the Hard News Network, and subscribe to this channel. You can also throw me a few bucks on the Patreon below. It's in the description. And share the video.